Welcome to Fret Buzz, the podcast. My name is Joe McMurray.
And I am Aaron Sefchick.
And today we have with us Carter Gravatt. He's the lead guitarist for Carbon Leaf, a national touring rock band. And we're excited to have you. Good morning, Carter.
Morning, guys.
Yeah, so where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from my garage.
Carter's garage.
It's for those of you who can't see, it's a nicer than average garage. It's finished. And it's got stacks of amps and guitars behind him.
Awesome.
The hiding place for all my good stuff.
You're in Virginia, though, right?
Yep, right outside of Richmond. I live in like one of the surrounding counties. So
that's kind of the headquarters of Carbon Leaf, right?
Absolutely. I would say the headquarters is probably Terry's house.
Okay.
Guitar player, because we built. I think it was when we did the Curious George soundtrack. We built out his studio so that we could track pretty much anything we needed to do in there. He was the A engineer at one of the big studios in town before he just touring got to the point where he just couldn't, had to call in too often, and they had to replace him. But so he's probably engineered or co-engineered every release we've ever had, I think.
Oh wow! How many albums have you guys released?
I was just like, wow, I wonder how many that is. It's a lot, somewhere in the teens, I think, or something like that.
Barry was saying you guys were trying to put out an album every 8 months or so.
Yeah, well, that's kind of our motto: is unattainable goals on an unrealistic time frame.
Okay.
And you're pretty good about doing that. But yeah, it'd be really nice to. Unfortunately, you just run into, there's so much stuff going on, especially this day and age. Just keeping up with your head above water with all of the social media stuff that needs to be maintained, and there's so much stuff going on now. It's just incredible. But yeah, it would be great if we could make that, and it's nice to have a goal like that keeps you rolling and creatively, as well as you've got the touring going on and everything else. But yeah. I guess the Gathering EP came out, and that's, if I understand correctly, supposed to be one of four for that particular project, which I would assume would be thematically tied in, or if not musically as well. And then we also want to do some rock record and stuff like that. But then you get into what's an album these days? Nobody puts out more than like 5 songs at a time.
Yeah, it's
coming from old school, where you come up with a block of songs that make sense together, and you think you're telling like a cohesive thing. Now it's gotten run down to like a couple of songs. You put out more than that, and it's just kind of wasting them. But yeah, we're definitely trying to maintain a pretty nimble release schedule, and being independent, we can do that. You don't have to wait for anybody except yourself.
Independent from a record label.
Yeah. We did 3 albums on Vanguard, and I guess they wanted, it was about 2009-ish, I think, that we went back to straight independent. And now you can kind of build your own label kind of a la carte as you need it, as opposed to, being on a label where you're part of that huge support structure at any given time. But it's like turning a battleship, when you want to do something. Now if you need something, you can hire out for the duration of how long you would need that person to work for you.
Like promotional people or marketing specialists.
Oh, if you wanted to push a song to radio, you'd hire a promoter that would run it for a certain cycle and then be gone, or extra promotions people if you're putting an album out. Just about anything. As the big systems have dissolved, there are tons of great people out there that you can work with that kind of have their own thing going.
So you get a promoter, they just have special ins with the radio stations, and they just spend X hours a day sending your album to everybody?
Something along those lines, yeah. And it's people that used to work for labels, and now they've started their own thing. They have the relationships with people, and if they take on your album, I guess the people that they know, well, because they've taken it on and they've worked with them in the past, will give it a listen or give it a chance just because. But I don't know that there are a ton of guarantees in any of that, you know.
Right.
But again, I'm not as tapped in to that as say Barry and Terry are, who really have their finger on the pulse of everything that's kind of going on.
Well, for those of you who didn't notice, we actually had a two-part interview with Barry. You can check it out in our episodes archive. Had a great conversation with him. And Carter, you probably don't know this, but we actually interviewed Steve Black, an FM radio host out of Detroit. I don't know if you know him, but it was a really cool interview because he's done like 1,500 interviews. Isn't that right, Aaron?
Yeah.
Yeah, like he's interviewed like tons and tons of big name bands from the 80s, late 80s through today. He's partied with Guns N' Roses and all kinds of cool stories. But he had a lot of interesting insights into the world of FM radio,
I'm sure,
currently, and how it's changed over the years.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah, golly. And yeah, to have been in the trenches over, you know, the last 20 years would be, you know, I can't imagine there was a time where there was more change going on since like from the late 90s till now.
Yeah. Now it's internet radio and Sirius XM and
so many things. Yeah.
Apple Music and Amazon Music. There's so many different platforms.
Yeah. Oh, so true.
Well, with all the time spent on all these other aspects of the band, how do you find time to practice? And like I talked about this earlier, well, before the show, but for those of you who don't know Carbon Leaf or haven't seen them, I got to see them at St. Patrick's Day weekend in Virginia Beach at Elevation 27, and I had never seen them before. I had listened to their music before, but on Carter's side of the stage, there were at least 10 to maybe there were 12 or 13 instruments. And there were multiple guitars, but there was a mandolin, there was a cello, a fiddle, an old like parlor acoustic guitar, you know, Les Pauls and Strats and kind of everything in between. So, banjo, yeah.
Yeah, it's you know, stuff that's kind of come in over the years. I guess we it probably started, we got a little bored writing with two guitars kind of quick. You know, by the second album, it was like, all right, well, you know, there's two guitars. What else? And that I think that what else is what ended up burning me in the end. But yeah, so I was a big fan of REM, and you know, obviously Peter Buck was playing mandolin on like Green and Out of Time, and then John Paul Jones for the Zeppelin stuff. And then growing up in the country, you know, there's, you know, a lot of, I heard a lot of bluegrass, but kind of, you know, it wasn't right in my face, but kind of in the background of, so I was like, you know, I'm gonna get a mandolin. So I ordered a mandolin, and it came in a box, and the bridge was laying down on it when it showed up. So I opened this box, and the strings are just hanging loose, and the bridge is laying on the top. I was like, well,
Oops.
Is it broken? You know, you know, but finally figured out how to set that up. And I think that day I wrote this song we have called Ordinary Eyes that was on our third album. But yeah, so I just started picking up instruments, and that one I just kind of beat on for a while until Barry was tinkering around with the banjo for a little bit. And we had this really cool record store called Plan 9 up the road from where we lived. And he got this record, and he came over to me and was like, hey, you know, I got this record. I'm not that into it, but I think you need to hear it. And it was Edgar Meyer, Mike Marshall, and Bela Fleck. It was a record called Uncommon Ritual. Mm-hmm. That record like rearranged everything. It was like somebody pulled up the parking brake, and you know, all sorts of stuff that you thought were like where the ceiling was, you know, with some types of music and with mandolin and stuff, that was just all completely ripped off. And that was the beginning for me of like practice and listening and like getting into like going, okay, you know, this isn't, it's not what I thought. You know, there's a whole nother world out there, and everything's got, you know, there's no limit to the possibilities. So I was playing, I play guitar with kind of a pick and my fingers. I'll leave my hand kind of open for chicken pick and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't really work that well on the mandolin, or at least it didn't for me, because you end up with all this extra weight swinging around when you've got a really tiny space. So I taught myself to play mandolin with a closed hand, which was like, you know, it's like a year. It's like throwing everything back into first gear. You're like, okay. But so yeah, after that, and kind of, you know, that just kind of blew my world open. And
The Bela Fleck Edgar Meyer album.
yeah,
I think Bela Fleck does that to everybody.
Yeah.
Player, and Mike Marshall was on that, and up until then, like, mandolin ended for me with I think I had one Bela like Flecktones record. It was Live Art, and Sam Bush is on there, and I was like, okay, well, this has got to be the pinnacle. You know, that's Sam Bush. You know, I know Sam Bush. He's got to be, you know, there's the ceiling. And then and Sam is amazing, but then I heard Mike Marshall, and he was playing a lot cleaner and a lot more technical, and that just really, you know, I didn't realize how beautiful the mandolin could be, you know, as its own thing. And so that really sent me down a rabbit hole. But then, you know, I picked up a banjo. I got into old time music, like old time Appalachian music, as opposed to bluegrass, which is very different. And like any genre of music, you know, you get into it, and they're going to be the purists. They're going to take your head off, you know, when you get anything wrong. But I got into you know, a little clawhammer banjo, then into more of I can do some of the Scruggs stuff, or the, you know, the Bela stuff. Got into steel, picked up a fiddle, which was, I put that off forever, because it is the worst, because you know how bad you are. You have to stick right next to your ear, and it's loud as hell and terrible.
And your intonation is
it's
far more difficult without frets.
It's the worst. I think I picked that and the steel pedal steel up at the same time. And it was just an out of tune nightmare.
So how do you? That's what I want to know, because like I try to do this too, and I teach piano, and I teach various instruments, and there's just so much time in the day, and to really get pretty much any instrument is a full undertaking that, you know, if I was teaching my students, I would say you should be practicing at a minimum 15 to 30 minutes a day if you really want to get better. So, you know, you got to apply that to yourself too. And were you actually spending that much time each day on each of these instruments?
They came, you know, it was kind of over the years that I would, you know, pick each one up. But, you know, there's certainly time, you know, especially now, you know, I've got kids, and we've got the band, and, you know, the guys really don't like to hear me noodling around. You know, if we were like on the bus or something like that, that was like shut down quickly. They're like, you're gonna, no. But yeah,
Man,
just because if I I would play like all day on the bus. I would just sit, and I'd love every second of it.
Right.
couldn't you get like you know, run it into headphones?
Yeah, but there's still that, you know, that tick, 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 you know, kind of stuff going on with, you know, even with electric guitar, you know, you can
Yeah.
Oh man, there's got to be a compromise where you can like turn on the fan or something.
Yeah. Yeah, like leave on the fan at that.
White noise, like a white noise CD.
But no, so you just, you know, you find your times, and you know, there are times when you'll be able to practice ferociously, you know, especially if like I find something that I want to learn, if it's a piece of music, or if I get to the point that I'm like, I see something that I really want to be capable of, or hear something, something inspires me to really dig in, then it's, you know, it's pretty much on at that point. Any spare second I have, I'm going to be, you know, digging away at that.
I love that feeling.
Oh, it's the best. There's nothing better than having, you know, seeing it, something that you want to attain, and, you know, just getting after it.
It's like a full-blown obsession that overcomes you, and you like, I'm like watching YouTube videos and listening everywhere I go, and like carrying around my mini speaker around the house listening, and then I like, oh, I gotta try it, and I sit down for a couple hours.
Well, that was what I was going to say is that, so this is all self-taught,
Yeah.
correct? And this is, I would imagine, before YouTube. So you didn't have the internet to just kind of go to quickly learn how to play the banjo or fiddle or anything like that. It's just a matter of sitting there with the instrument for hours upon end and actually figuring it out for yourself.
Yeah, it is. It is unbelievable how much information is at people's fingertips these days. And, you know, it's kind of mind blowing. God, anything you want to learn, it's literally right at your fingertips. Which is mind blowing for me because I was swinging in the dark.
Right.
You know? And we moved to Richmond, and you know, I didn't have any infrastructure of friends or know anybody here really. So it was just basically the band. And then, you know, so I'd go to the record store and just buy records, you know, and, you know, which is incredibly foolhardy, you know, financially. But, you know, for every 10 records or so I'd find something that I was like, okay, no, I'm going to, you know, I dig this. So, and it would take me somewhere. And then out of every 20, you'd find a real gem, you know, that you're like, okay, all right. But, yeah, so it was a lot of just kind of hammering away at stuff, listening to records, and I was never really good at probably like massive undiagnosed ADD, but I've never been able to sit down and transcribe people's solos or anything like that. I've never been in a situation where I had to, but just never got into that sort of thing. So what I would just listen. And try to hear like how they were playing and kind of the overall arc of, you know, what was going on. And, you know, listening to like the way people would attack instruments, especially the mandolin stuff and, you know, the banjo. And yeah, it was just a lot of, you know, and you could get books, you know, you could find random books or, you know, I've got a rack of books that I've, you know, opened like 4 pages. You know, like the Goodrick, the Advancing Guitarist. Do you guys have that one?
No.
Oh my God. It's one of those things you get in like 3 pages. You're like, all right. Yep. That's too heavy. Yep. You know, it's like soloing on one string over like giant steps. You know, and you can go like a half step up or a full step down or the step you're on, you know, like, oh, okay, no.
That's what I got this book, this Joe Pass guitar style.
Yeah.
And it's so heavy. I'll pick out one lesson and work on it for a couple weeks. And that's like, it's just not the kind of book you can work through very quickly and retain. At least for me, it's slow going.
It's like, you know, a concept. You read one page and mind's blown. You read it again and you're like, okay, I think I see where he's coming from. And you know, you work on that for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But yeah, so long story short, there was no YouTube. There was just kind of figuring it out.
There's some instructional videos that were pretty good.
Oh yeah,
the Paul Gilbert stuff came out in the 90s, and
that was, I know that name, but I'm not sure who that is.
Yeah. You don't know Paul?
Mm-mm.
Paul's.
I remember the Hot Licks videos, which got absorbed into something else now.
Yeah.
And there's this the homespun stuff, which I think is online now, and they had some cool stuff. But yeah, I remember I got the Brian Setzer video because I always loved his playing, and I don't think I learned a single thing, but it was fun to watch people play, you know?
Yeah.
And you could listen to them like the openings and when they would play stuff, and that's as close as I would get to, you know, going to a concert and seeing these guys was those little. It's like, you know, buying the video for like the little YouTube clips of, you know, watching him open up or play like Rock This Town or something.
Yeah. No, I remember buying VHS tapes when you were young and, you know, watching them over and over and over again because that was the only thing that you had available to you.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the only way you could get a hold of any of that stuff or see like a lot of these people that I would never ever have a chance to see. I remember Danny Gatton passed away before I was able to see him, and I have his old tape, and you know, you can't take anything. I couldn't take anything away from that. The video, but watching him play was just so neat.
Yeah.
You know, his like just his approach to the guitar, he just knew it so well. There wasn't, you know, I think it's to the point it's hard to listen to because like he's harmonizing with himself when he's playing solos just because he's bored. You know, it's like he's taking everything into like solos, and he's playing his solos as like triads, and all the way up you're just like, what the hell is happening?
Yeah.
But
I've seen some of that video. He's crazy good.
just so good.
And he's like, and he'll play with like Tom Pop. I can't remember it, but I've seen him.
Of course, is it? Yes, I know. I think I know what you're talking
The
about.
Italian name, but Danny Gatton, he's not got the formal training, but he just like put him right next to like a real jazz player, and he outplays him.
He's internalized like the music, and he can hear all the voicings and hear exactly what's going on.
Yeah, he's lightning fast.
Oh my god!
Can play straight ahead jazz. Can mix. He's kind of like the Bela Fleck of the guitar. He's mixing styles that you wouldn't normally hear.
It is, yeah. That was just terrible, you know, that we lost him. I guess that was about 95, 94, 95, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Such a bummer. But yeah, now oh yeah, so practice. Yeah. So man, whenever I can, you know, especially these days with kids, you know, if I get a spare minute, I'll just go out and tinker with something. But also when you build up, you know, when you're taking that many instruments on the road, you're doing a lot of repair work and maintenance stuff too. So that's kind of one of the big. Yeah, I think when we chatted that the other day, I was talking about it's like, so there's the creative time when you're writing. There's you can work on like pushing technique on all of the instruments down the field, you know, if just a little bit further. And then there's like teching all the gear, you know, fixing stuff, making sure things are working, or trying out something new, you know, especially with all the acoustic instruments, you know, a new way to make them sound slightly more palatable. Because, I mean, let's be honest, you plug in an acoustic instrument, it just sounds like poop. And then
what do you do for your acoustics to make them sound better? Especially the guitar.
It's tough, man. Because I have to run the way I run all that stuff. So I've probably got like 10 different acoustic instruments at a show or so, maybe a little bit more depending on what we're doing. But I've also got to be relatively streamlined as far as my inputs go, and how I'm transferring that to, you know, our front of house engineer. So I actually have to run, or I'm currently running, in order to make it, because I mean my floor footprint is massive. But I run it through one preamp, which is kind of nuts when you really think about it. You know, it's easy to come up with a signal chain for any one instrument and make it sound pretty good. But coming up with a signal chain for, you know, all these different instruments, all these different types of pickups, and have it kind of work together is a little challenging.
So what does that look like?
Hell on earth, really.
Yeah, I imagine so.
Like blew up like a computer factory and then put it on the ground. I can show you. Well, all right. So I've got it behind me, but I guess it's
Yeah.
We'll explain it. Explain it while you show us, and people can get on YouTube if they want to see.
Let's see here. See how well I can turn you guys. Oh Lord, tangled up in cables, not tangled up in blue, as the song suggests. So let's see. So you can see it. That's my acoustic board down there.
Oh yeah.
So there's a lot of switching that goes on there. So it'll go from gosh, let's see. How can I explain this? So first thing is I got to get into it. So I'll run a wireless line, 2 different wireless lines. One's for the fiddles, one's for everything else, and then the third line would be for the hurdy-gurdy. And then they'll all run into a Grace Felix preamp.
Okay.
And in the effects loop of that, I've got a Origin Effects Cali 76 compressor. It's a really amazing sounding compressor. They're huge, But if we go through much more of my gear, you'll understand that like huge pedals are kind of my thing. But they turn off a lot of people because they're just enormous, but they sound great. So I've got that, the LR Bags Reverb, which I think is spectacular. Then I've got, which is currently in the shop, an API transformer. It's their kind of guitar pedal, but it has their little preamp section, like an EQ section, and
is that the new one that they came out with?
Which is also enormous.
Yeah, I saw that probably last year and was like, whoa, I'd love to get my hands on one of those. That's cool. You have one
on electric. I've plugged for sessions and stuff, plugged straight in a mandolin straight into like an API lunchbox and be like, oh, that sounds nice.
Yeah.
Bring a lunchbox on tour and you're like, that'll last about 5 minutes. But then, so from that, I go into a full tone tape echo and then run out to a bunch of splitters. And the splitters, I use a bunch of the Gig Rig stuff. I don't know if you guys have checked that out. I love their stuff. They've got a line splitter called the Humdinger, which is awesome. So I'll hit that, and then one of those lines goes to one of their little, I guess it's one of those little strips where you can have like your own little effects loops. You can put put things in and out, but I'm using it as a send thing. So all the sends are I'm just kind of using as outs. So it's like having a 1 to 4 out thing. So the 4 outputs of that go to Neve DIs that are on the back line, and that'll split up all the different things. So you hit the Humdinger, one of those goes there, and that sends the main signal to the main DI. Then there's an effects that goes out of the other side of the Humdinger, which gets octave effects and potentially a looper for the acoustic instruments. So the cello and the fiddles, and sometimes for acoustic guitar, I'll use a couple of different octave things to kind of fill out. Because I mean, most of the time when somebody picks up a fiddle in a rock band and you were playing like this grand, glorious electric guitar stuff that fills up the room, you go to a fiddle and you've got this screechy, horrible thing. So if you add a little bit of girth from, for the fiddle, I use the Hog, the EHX, the big thing, yet another pedal. And for the acoustic, I use the TC Poly something or another. It's their little octave thing. It's one of the kind of smaller guys.
And you're hitting it an octave below to fill it out?
Fiddle gets an octave and another octave, a second octave.
Below.
Up, because any octave pedal, in my opinion, that goes up, it's just too bright. It's just like puts this sizzly high end on everything you send. So the acoustic one that goes to the cello and stuff just gets 1 octave lower, and the fiddle gets 2. And then so our engineer gets both of those lines, so he can kind of blend them depending on how the PA. Some are sub heavy, so you can't put too much in there, otherwise people poop their pants. The brown note.
So you guys run with your own engineer venue to venue?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We've toured with our own engineer forever.
Okay.
That was one of the first things we learned, especially, with all the instrument switching that I'm doing, sometimes playing 2 or 3 things, a song, all 5 of us sing. There's so much stuff happening. If you're, a house engineer and we show up, you're just going to be like, what in the hell just happened?
Yeah, right.
Especially EQing in all the different acoustic instruments and having them kind of work and sound somewhat palatable, and having things where they need to be in the mix with all the songs. And there's also pretty little air in our sets. Song to song, it's like each one is like right on top of the other. So there's really, once we get started, there's no real break.
Right. No banter or anything like that.
Not really, unless Barry's feeling particularly chatty.
He's fairly chatty at St. Patrick's Day.
Was he? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Every show is a little bit different, but normally there's no real unless something, you know, I don't know. Every now and then, he'll get off on a tangent, but it's normally pretty quick.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we have our own guy, which is awesome.
Yeah, very much so. Very much like the sixth member of your choir,
Absolutely,
really.
absolutely. And you know, he's also handling, you know, a bunch of stuff. He helps me with my gear before the show, just checking everything to make sure everything looks right, because they don't like for me to come out before the show, because I would love, if I had my, you know, my choice, I'd be out there, you know, checking everything, make sure all the settings are right, because, you know, if you have like an opener, you know, cables will inevitably get dragged across your stuff.
Right.
And, you know, when you've got like a field of dreams like I do down there, it's like, all right, everything looks all right, but then you step on one thing that's just like blows up the stage. Well, so I guess they hit that one tonight.
Right.
Yeah, he's just incredible.
Awesome. And how long has he been with you?
He's our current guy's been with us for about 6 years, I think.
Okay.
I think no matter what, I'll probably get it wrong and he'll be insulted. But yeah, he is spectacular. And we also record all the shows and sell them after. So he's handling, you know, indexing and all that stuff right after the show. He's on that, and then bumping them down to these little thumb drives, among a million other responsibilities that he has.
Awesome.
But yeah, the short version of my acoustic signal path, which is pretty convoluted.
Yeah, we had on Dustin Furlow, who's a fingerstyle guitarist.
Yeah.
And we, like, I have my Taylor here. It's just got the undersaddle built in, the piezo pickup, and it, you know, it just doesn't sound that good. And so he's saying a lot of the guys use solo fingerstyle guitarists use these nice microphone inputs that are, or you blend the piezo and the microphone pickups.
DPA makes a really great mic. There are a lot of DPA.
Okay.
Great mics that a lot of people use. I can't do that just because our stage is a little bit too loud. But with a full drum kit, and, you know, John's rocking an 8x10, it's, you know, it's too loud and it's too much ambient noise. And I'm a really quiet player, so that makes it even worse, obviously. You
have to turn up even more.
Yeah, it's you know, you basically turn me up. You're turning up the snare drum.
Right.
So yeah, I wish that there were more options like that for me. But trying to do this stuff in like a full rock band makes it a little more tricky. For acoustics, I use the LR Baggs M80 pickup, the sound hole pickup, and the M1. I think it's the M80. There's the M1 active, and then the one that's got the little brown strip in the middle, I think it's the M80. And that's what I use for all of my acoustics. And one thing I like is when we're not touring, or if we're doing a radio show or anything, I can just unscrew it and pop the pickup out. And it's just, you know, the one little cable, which I have taped right inside the sound hole. And I just, you know, I'll just pop it out real quick. And, you know, then you've got, you know, your normal guitar. But yeah, I've been using those since they came out, and I was using the M1 since, I think I might have gotten one of the early ones, right, even before it hit the street. But yeah, I dig those. And I like getting the attack away from the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're like, I think if you're going to use any of the current modeling stuff that they have, it's probably best to have that under the saddle thing, you know, like the Tone Dexter or any of those things that are doing imaging. It's probably advantageous to use a different style pickup. But if you're just using a regular preamp and a pickup, I've been as happy as I've been with anything with these guys, and it sounds a little more palatable getting that attack, you know, out of like right there where all that tension is, and it's a little less rubber bandy.
Well, so we've talked about all these acoustic instruments, but I mean, you are a phenomenal lead guitar player. So can we jump over to
Sure.
the electric stuff? The other day you were showing me your different amps and your you were playing on the Stratocaster and showing me some stuff. So it looked like you had several half stacks and different amp models.
I've
Yeah,
got. I'm trying to figure out a way that I can. Let's see. How can I do this? And try to find a extension cable so that I can move about more freely.
For those of you who are listening on the podcast, we definitely jump over to Fretbuzz the podcast on our YouTube channel. You can see all the cool things that he's got.
All right, let me see. Yep, I'm dropping stuff already. All right, you guys. All right, can you hear?
We can.
Oh, sweet. All right. All right, let's see here. Whoa, there, that's gonna fall over. All right, so let's see. I'm gonna spin you guys around here. Let's see if the thing does. Oh, that didn't work at all. Yeah, I'm not even gonna do that. All right. So here we are in amp land. I'll start over here. That's my favorite rig to take out. That's an old 72 100-watt Marshall super trim. My favorite Bluto, and an old 64 basement cab I bought from Lindy Fralin. A couple of fun amps that Bill Callahan built that are awesome. My 412, which is very heavy. The current touring rig, which is what I've been using for most of the last couple of years. That's an old 64 twin and Bluto number 2. Then there's some fun stuff. Old 66 Super Holland, 64 Princeton, 65 Deluxe, 64 Bassman, a Swart matchless, and then another amp. So all sorts of fun stuff.
That's beautiful.
Salivating over here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you've been playing this long, it doesn't seem like it just kind of comes, an amp every year or so, and next thing you know, you have a garage full. Yeah, I mean, the Super I just got last year, it was from, I guess, an estate sale, and a buddy had it, and he was like, "Man, do you want a Super?" I was like, "Absolutely not." And he was like, "Well, I'll give it to you for this." I said, "Well, I guess I'll have a Super then." I guess, all right. Now I have a Super Reverb. But yeah, so I was using the bigger rig for ever, and I guess for whatever reason I decided to switch down to the twin. Everybody used to tell me, they were like, "Oh, you don't want a twin, you don't want a twin." It's like, "Are you sure?" They're like, "No, you want a deluxe, you want this or that." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, I do love deluxe reverbs, they're great." And I finally got a twin. I was like, "This is what I wanted that whole time." Man, I never should have listened to you guys.
Why do you like the twin better?
I love the twin.
Why would you rather have that over the deluxe?
Just the oomph. It's just got a lot of, I don't know. It's just a little more sturdy sounding. The deluxe, I feel like sometimes, I remember I think we were playing with like the Goo Goo Dolls or something. And I had this little petite rig that I was like, oh, it's so light, so cute. And I got in there and I couldn't tell if my amps were broken because I couldn't hear them from the front of the stage. I was like, man, are they even on? Did they die? And I was like, all right, so deluxe might be a little bit small.
But you were they're micing your amp anyway, right?
Yeah, but I wasn't using ears, and at the time wasn't, putting guitar in the monitor has never been something that sounded quite right to me, because then you've got a whole different speaker configuration giving you what's coming out of your amp, and you're like, but what's coming out of my amp is what it's supposed to sound like.
Right.
My amp doesn't have a horn,
Yeah.
Like, sweet Jesus. But yeah, I switched to the twin a couple of years ago, and I've got these two Bluto tone heads that I just adore. And so the big one is 150 watts. And I got, and Brandon he came out with a smaller version of that head. And I got one of those, and it's only 100 watts, very small. With, EL34s. So it's a little bit more Marshall-y. So I took the twin and I took out the speakers that were in it, which were the originals, and I put in EV12Ls, which are, if you don't know anything or don't know, those are about the heaviest guitar speakers on the planet. So I took the heaviest combo amp in the world and made it like twice as heavy. So when we took it out on the first run, and the speakers were so heavy that they ripped the baffle out, so the whole thing, it was hysterical. I turned around and the speakers are pointing up at the ceiling. It was amazing. I was like, "Oh, that's probably not good." But the guys down at Mojo, I sent them the baffle that was, looks like it's particle board or whatever, and it was just shredded. I sent that to them, and they took the grow cloth off and everything, and made me a new one that's super sturdy. So anyway, the Twin gets one of those speakers, and the Bluto gets the other. So basically, I've got a 2-amp rig that's got a really small footprint compared to when I was using the basement cab, which is pretty substantial, and 2 heads. It's a pretty good bit of oomph for a relatively small footprint, I feel like.
So I've moved small. I've gone the opposite, although I'm playing totally different types of shows from you. But because I like pushing I use the Princeton Reverb so that I can get it to break up a little bit. So are you actually pushing your amp to break up, or using pedals?
No. All right. So all my amps are such high wattage that I've got them like cranked up. So I'll baffle amps off. So I'll take pedalboard lids that have foam on the inside, and I'll put one behind it to block the reflection of the wall, and then one in front to keep from neutering the people in the front row.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I'll crank them up to the point that they're, if I can, and still the reflection still can get pretty loud. But I'll crank those up to where they're, pretty darn loud. And then, I get all my gain off the floor, and I kind of like it that way. If I'm using the Marshall, if I'm playing something with humbuckers, it'll break up. It's loud enough to break up a little bit. But that's also why I use the high wattage speakers. Is if I'm getting breakup, I want to know it's either coming from the floor, maybe the amp. I don't need that third thing in there that might also possibly be distorting. So I find it just cleans things up a little bit for me. But yeah, so they're loud, but they're not breaking up, generally speaking.
Huh. Yeah, I like when I'm practicing, I'm using 100% pedal distortion.
Yeah.
But when I play, as soon as I get to play outside, like the mixture of the two, I don't particularly love the sound of, if I'm playing lead guitar, I'm not looking for like a 50s blues breakup.
Mm-hmm.
But the combination of a pedal with the natural amp breakup is my favorite. It's very it's this soaring sound that I get out of my amp.
I think that for me, that would work better. I feel like a lot of amps, when you start to overdrive them, they get a little splatty. And kind of, I don't know. I feel like a pedal will help kind of compress it a little bit and tighten it up and keep it from just kind of falling apart a little too much. But that's like their own way of doing stuff, which is the coolest thing about, especially now in the gear revolution. Gosh, when I was coming up, there was none of this stuff. Like if you wanted a distortion pedal, there was like one option. It's like you didn't have to worry about that. It was just finding one. It wasn't like now where you've got to research for like 5 months. It's like going down the cereal aisle at the grocery store. You're like, what?
Yeah.
And it's hard to, like, you go to Guitar Center, you can only try so many before the guys get a little,
really.
If you go, there's so many.
Mm-hmm.
You can't try them all.
And heaven forbid you get online and start looking at the inventory of places like Music Toys or something like that, where it's just pages and pages of just overdrive pedals, not even distortion, just like overdrive. But the stuff that I use has pretty much been the same for an embarrassingly long time. Yeah, kind of frightening. I really probably should get somebody to overhaul everything that I've got going on. But yeah, since I started, I've always used pedals for distortion, just because it's just kind of what worked for me. And I was doing a little more looping back then. So if you're running a loop into a distorted amp, it really doesn't work. So keeping the gain before that was also another another reason I did that. I think I can't remember. It's hard to remember what my brain was doing back then.
Why the obsession with large pedals?
Man, the ones that I got just sounded better. Do you remember using Kettner pedals?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Like I love the original Rotosphere. I've got one of those, and they had this thing called the Replex, which I'll walk you guys over there again, which I've used forever, and I've probably had about 8 or 10 of them. So let's see, can you see the big silver guys that have tape all over them? Right there. So those guys, I used the Replexes there. It was like a dual head tape thing, maybe supposed to be a tape simulator or something like that, but like that kind of thing. And so I was telling you that I turned the amps up pretty loud. I've never really changed the volume on the amps. They're always cranked, but for the room, I actually use that pedal as a preamp for the whole rig. So it has on off. The second channel's reverb, so I have the reverb turned all the way off, but I use that to engage the pedal, and then the preamp of the pedal is in line, so I can use that if I'm too loud for a room. I'll pull it down there, so I just won't hit the amps on the front end quite as hard as I would like to, but it's a good way to keep the amps kind of cooking and just pull down my overall volume. But yeah, so those things are huge. I was down in Virginia Beach ages ago, and I bought this Buddha overdrive pedal that's the size of like a Star Wars lunchbox. And it's got two 12AX7s, and I still use that, and that's huge. I've got another one of those Origin compressors on there, and that's huge. So those 4 pedals, I think, are probably bigger than most people's pedal boards altogether.
And do you have to carry? Do the other guys help you carry this, or?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I mean, we all load the rig and unload it, as a group. So
I mean, it's a good workout. It's like a group fitness plan. You just get heavier stuff, and everybody stays fit.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm stuck in merch or something like that, some of the guys will start to pack up my stuff. But normally, I try to pack, and I definitely unpack and set up everything. Which takes a minute. It's a fair amount of stuff rolling around, but yeah, I tried to streamline it down to a smaller board, but I guess maybe we have 17 albums, and there are a couple of pedals on there that if we do like a handful of songs, I kind of need that one thing. Do I have to have it? No. Does it make the song kind of better and more like it? People want to hear it, probably.
Yeah.
I think it was around 2009 or 2010. I tried to do a tour with just like mostly all electric guitar, and I had a ball. It was so nice. You were talking about switching between songs. It was so, man, I was just like, this is awesome, man. I'm so comfortable. Like 3 songs in, you're just like, oh yeah. I can, electric guitar, man. This is a lot of fun. But it was, I think people kind of like to see the circus monkey running around and playing all the different stuff, and it creates a certain vibe, and it's fun. Like we'll show up in a theater, like a seated theater, and I'll play different instruments on every tune than I would at, say, a standing rock show. But it's nice to have those options. So, we'll go over the set list in venues like that. I'll go over with Barry and he'll say, mandolin on these 3, maybe banjo here, steel here. Let's do this on whatever. And it changes up the dynamics of the songs, and you might find a better way to play a tune that you hadn't before, or something that'll help connect with people that wouldn't have, if you're just like slamming it out on electric, which is lots of fun.
It definitely helped keep it made every song, it kept songs from running together. Sometimes with bands, even when you like them, if it's the same overall sound, you start to kind of zone in and out.
Yeah, your ears can get kind of numb from that same thing, and I feel like things become a little more indistinct. Turns into this wall. But yeah, it certainly separates, sometimes probably a little too dramatically, some of the songs from each other. But yeah, that's certainly jumping from, all the different scale lengths to fretless to, whatever it is, pretty nerve-wracking. Like all the lights in your face, you can't quite hear it. Every instrument that you pick up, you're not going to be able to hear it like you heard the last one. So you've got to immediately like try to focus in on it in your head and figure out where it is in the mix so you can distinguish yourself and find, what you're doing. And, it keeps you, it really keeps you on your toes. And then, I've got to sing, playing like double stops on a fiddle and singing at the same time is not sweet. Especially when you're not like a fiddle player. It's when you're a guitar player that owns a fiddle. It's a little nerve-wracking.
I find it hard. Even I've been doing these acoustic sets in the middle of my overall electric sets.
Yeah.
And it's even just switching, having a wider nut on my acoustic. I mean, everything, I just feel clumsy. I usually try to put something a little easier as my first acoustic song.
Yeah.
I can get my fingers used to that scale length and that just different feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. God, I wish that whenever I tell Barry, I'm like, could we not do that right there? He's like, that's like a challenge of him. He's like, oh yeah, you can do it. I'm like, well, yes, technically I can do it. Is that the best thing we should do? Maybe. Yeah.
Might have to go out on an acoustic tour or something. A very minimalistic.
Yeah. Oh God, it would be so. A boy can dream. Yeah, just go play mandolin. But yeah, it's figuring out how to do it over the years. I used to have like a different. We were talking about just the differences in like the different picks that I'll use for different instruments. The way you hold them is different. The way you attack the instruments are different. It's just getting used to switching. Like right before we go out on a big tour, say in the fall, I'll start, practice for that will be just me going around the room and playing, picking something up and just playing on it for a minute, then switching to something else and, playing a couple of tunes on it or whatever, but getting used to just switching, haphazardly and trying to instantly make, some sort of palatable noise. But yeah,
smart way to do it.
Different picks for like almost everything. And I've gotten to the point now that I've streamlined it down and I'll just use 2 different things and hopefully I won't drop one because I have like one of each. I'll sit around like and nerd and like sand the burrs off the picks and stuff like that. But when I lose a pick, it's like,
I like my picks so much. I got 100-pack of my Dunlop, the Ultex 90.90 millimeter. I have to have that pick. I feel clumsy with anything.
What shape?
It's like the pointy. It's this. Can you?
Oh yeah. The standard Fender, I would call that.
Yeah, but it's a Dunlop Ultex Sharp 0.9, but I use a 0.73 for my acoustic.
Yeah. See, here's a Dunlop Ultex pick, and let's see what else. Let's see what's looking around the old desk here. I know there's another one of those around here somewhere. I saw it just yesterday.
I gotta get thumb picks too.
Yeah, I switched out to the little Jazz 3s years ago.
Okay. Yeah,
I've
seen those.
But
I got one right. Oops.
Everybody's sharing their picks. Yep.
Yeah, right there.
Don't pick on me.
Oh yeah, I like yours, Aaron. Those are pretty similar to my Ultex.
Yeah,
what was that, Aaron?
I've got the Clayton.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
The same like light yellow.
Yeah, that same
material that is like it disappears instantly the second it hits the ground. No matter what surface it's on.
One up you. I use these clear picks for electric.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, that guy, that was malicious. When you go clear, it's like,
yeah, can't you make it like bright orange?
You did that on purpose.
Neon.
But
I think it should have a little flashing neon light on it.
Well, LED inside.
LED, that would be great. Dunlop, please.
I know you're listening. Yeah. So I switched to these. Yeah. Now I found he did some that are green.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Uh,
Unless you're playing on grass.
nuts is so he's got this shape that I like, but the thickness varies dramatically. So, oh, here's a Clayton.
There you go.
Yeah.
I've got, oh, hey, the only time I ever got picks made, I got these Clayton purple dubers that say carbon leaf on them. Because they were like, well, do you want something on them? I was like, no. They're like, are you sure? I was like, okay, I guess you can put the band name on there. But anyway, so yeah, the guy, you have to specify, and you can only give him a range. You know, it's like I still got a bunch of different thicknesses. I'm like, I just want the one, you know.
Yeah.
Then I have to go through, you know, I'll order like 20 or 30, and you go through and find the ones that are thick enough and throw the others in the pile and take the ones that work. But
Yeah.
It's like my thumb picks. I have to. Some of them make your thumb like turn. It goes numb because it's so tight, and others fall off the second you kind of hit something a little weird.
I love the ones that are too loose because occasionally you'll catch a string under the side right there. And it's
Yeah.
bonk.
Pull it off.
Loudest sound ever, man. It's you just like,
It's terrible.
oh, you're trying to play a nice, pretty, like, you know, mellow passage. You're like, ah, plonk. Oh, Lord.
I guess that's what a compressor's for.
So much louder than everything else. Oh, man. Clams will always be the loudest. But yeah, picks, man. They're fun. I use the big burrito-shaped guys for acoustic. Yeah, I know, man. It's, you know, and miraculously, you can lose those too.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, man, that thing's the size of like a waffle. Where did it go?
For me, it always comes down to the texture of the pick. It has to have just a tiny bit of grit to it.
Man, it's funny because when anything like that makes sense on that side, I never like the way they sound. But if it's impossible to hold on to or invisible, then I totally love the way it sounds. I mean, I will sit around with these guys and like 1,000 grit wet dry paper and just keep at it until I get the edges to the point that they sound good. Because mandolins can sound so bad.
Yeah.
You know, just so bright and tinny, you know. And you can't really mod a mandolin to sound better, you know. It's like you take your sandpaper to it and start sanding the top off or something like that. What are you gonna do? There's nothing.
I've actually taken on my old Leatherman knife. I had like a saw option on it, and I would actually cross hatch the part where your thumb holds onto the pick.
Mm-hmm.
That helped for a while. Now I've adjusted. I don't lose the pick as much.
Yeah, I just gave up.
I tend to just clumsily drop the pick when I'm not playing is my problem.
Usually if I drop it, I'm going to drop it in the sound hole of any given instrument. So I know I can come back and get it later. Until then, it's like a maraca and a guitar. Or whatever. Just try not to jump around a lot. But yeah, man. Picks are funny. And
my kid students always drop their picks in the guitar.
You're
like, you shouldn't hold the pick in the strings like that. You're going to drop it. You're going to drop it. Up there it goes.
That's man. It seems the way people's pick hold, you can tell naturally, like, you know, this is either going to work for this kid or not, you know, and then there's the people that's holding, you know, well, that's not going to work like that. You know, got the pincer.
It's like when you try to pick up a granddaddy long legs and you don't really want to touch it.
Yeah. You're like,
or like a really gross, you know, something from the trash that the dog pulled out.
By the tail.
Yeah.
But yeah, did you have any other electric guitar rig questions or electric guitar in general? As I'm looking across to the field of dreams.
Well, in terms of like electric guitars, what are your babies? What do you play? And what would be your favorite?
Oh.
Yeah, right? Like there's an even answer to that.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, it's easy to. It's a clump of guitars that are my favorite. I'm trying to remember. I wasn't really went through a big thing where when I was really getting into mandolin stuff, I'd play electric guitar one song a night. The set was such that, you know, it was all acoustic guitar and mandolin. And around the time we started touring with Blues Traveler or somebody like that, I was like, all right, I got to get this electric thing figured out because, you know, and especially when we had this song called "What About Everything" that people were really digging, and it was something I wrote on mandolin, and you know, you're playing this very pretty little mandolin on this tune that's got, you know, it's kind of a rock tune, and you know, you're trying to convey, you know, to a big room full of people, like the arc of a rock song with a mandolin, you know, and you're like, all right, this isn't working. So I started switching some of those things stubbornly over to electric. And that's when I started really tinkering with what I wanted the electric guitar to sound like. So anyway, long story longer. I was, you know, I just kept getting different Fender guitars and I wasn't digging them. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna build my own vintage guitars. So I got a bunch of old bodies and necks and started putting together. I have like 250 Strats, and I had like my one pawn shop awesome prize is I have a 65 Telly that I bought for like $400.
Oh,
That's my one. Every other good story I have like that ended in, you know, dismay. But anyway, so I built those guitars and they were pretty good, and I was using those. And then a buddy of mine from Nashville, or that's in Nashville, told me I should get in touch with this guy named Bill Callahan, who's up in Winchester, Virginia, because there were some parts I needed and some other stuff. And he was playing a Strat that Bill had built. And so I went up there, and my Telly, this is another thing that sent me up there, has this teeny little neck on it. So we show up to gigs, and, you know, if it's too humid or it's, you know, too dry, the neck would just be like,
Oh.
So the action would like vary so much on that guitar that it was just, you know, I was starting to get kind of frustrated. So I got him to build me a pair of Tellys, and he built me a rosewood and a maple Telly. And when I got those, I liked them so much, I got him to do a pair of Strats for me, and I sold all the vintage stuff except for the old Telly. And I've been using those ever since. So those are my favorites. And depending on my mood, because I've got the whole, like the Fender Canon, a maple and a rosewood Strat, and a maple and a rosewood Telly. Those are typically what I'll gravitate towards at any given point. But he's not making guitars anymore, unfortunately.
oh,
Isn't that always the way? You know, and I get on him all the time, but he makes hardware. So if you wanted a steel bridge or anything for your Strats, or, you know, a bridge plate for your Telly, so he machines the saddles, these big, awesome burled knobs, which are great if you like to do this kind of stuff with Telly stuff. These plates, the steel neck plates, all of it. So a lot of the times they're using like zinc or pop metal. So it's really soft. Start replacing that stuff with steel, and you get like the whole instrumental transfer sound like way better.
Huh.
But yeah, so those are probably my favorites. And he does Gibson bridges and tailpieces too. I've got one of his bridges on my Gretsch. I guess on both of my Gretches, and all the Gibsons have his bridge and tailpiece and stuff like that on them.
of all the instruments, if you had them all laid out in front of you in terms of everything, what would you gravitate towards the most? Electric?
Mandolin.
Mandolin?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where your heart is.
Yeah, I don't know how it ended up that way. But yeah, if I'm just gonna walk around the house and play something, it'll 9 times out of 10 it'll be mandolin.
That's cool.
Yeah, I wish I played guitar more. Yeah, a wheel and amp around. I've got an acoustic flathead that I really love. I've got some acoustics that I really love. But yeah, I typically will just kind of walk around and play mandolin. I'm looking around to see what else I might have that you guys would like.
It seems like there are so many guitarists out there. You really are. It's almost smarter to go with the instrument that's less. If you want to stand out, it's just easier if you're a mandolin player, or if you're a slide guitarist, or just something out of the ordinary from your average. Even if you're really good at the guitar, there's so many people who are really good at it.
It's not. I wouldn't say that I'm motivated by anything like that, because fortunately I'm still in my first band. So
25 years later.
So all I have, and that's the great thing, is I just have to be me, you know. So I don't have to, you know, fight for the gig. I don't have to compete with anybody. I just get to be me.
Yeah.
And so I guess there's a kind of a, you know, it's kind of comforting, and the guys encourage me to do that. You know, I write accordingly. I get to kind of go off on whatever tangent I find inspiring.
And once again, that, ladies and gentlemen, is where we're going to leave it for today. Join us next Thursday for part 2 with Carter Gravatt of the band Carbon Leaf. First off, I want to thank you, our listener. It really does mean a lot to both Joe and I. I'm so overjoyed that you enjoy our content. We work really hard every week on this stuff, and I really, really, really enjoy what's going on. If you haven't already, head on over to YouTube. We need about 15 more to get 100 subscribers. Also, in addition, if you haven't already, head on over to iTunes and give us a review. It helps us out tremendously. If you don't know already, Apple is getting rid of the brand iTunes and moving everything over to Apple Podcasts and Apple Music and whatnot like that. So, but yeah, anyway, if you could go over there and give us a review, it helps us out a lot. And if you want to further support Fretbuzz the Podcast, head on over to Fretbuzz the Podcast Patreon page and check out the tiers there and become part of the Fretbuzz the Podcast family. Your support will help fund Fretbuzz the Podcast with all hosting fees and media fees and whatnot like that. So yeah, if you do choose to support Fretbuzz the Podcast, thank you very, very much. If you have questions about any of the past episodes, or maybe questions for some future guests, or just questions in general, send them my way at aaron@fretbuzzthepodcast.com. We definitely want to get our listeners involved. Joe and I both really enjoy that back and forth conversation. So yeah, send them our way. We love to get them. You know, it's a privilege and an honor to talk to all of our guests. To hear their stories and to hear their insights and to hear where they've come from, for them to share their knowledge with us. It's a great honor, and I hope that we're answering some questions that you guys may have and that you're pulling some good information from these episodes. So yeah, overall, just thank you once again for joining us on this journey. It means so much to us, and we're going to wonderful places in the future. So yes, thank you. Other than that takes care of everything. Remember, any questions, send them to aaron@fretbuzzthepodcast.com. And with that, join us next Thursday for part 2 with Carter Gravatt of the band Carbon Leaf on Fretbuzz the Podcast.